The sound of Mark's phone buzzing against the granite countertop cut through the steady rhythm of running water like a knife through silk. I was elbow-deep in soapy dishwater, the familiar scent of lemon dish soap mixing with the lingering aroma of the pot roast I'd spent 3 hours preparing for his business partners. My hands moved mechanically, plate, rinse, stack, while steam fogged the kitchen window that overlooked our manicured backyard in Westchester County. The October evening had turned crisp, and I could see Mrs. Henderson next door raking leaves into perfect piles, the golden maple leaves catching the last rays of sunlight filtering through the bare branches. 22 years of marriage had reduced me to this, the invisible woman who cooked, cleaned, and smiled on command. The woman who nodded approvingly when Mark explained investment strategies I wasn't supposed to understand, who laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny, who wore the clothes he complimented and avoided the ones that made him frown. The phone buzzed again, insistent, demanding. "Mark, your phone," I called out, but the shower was running upstairs. He was getting ready for tomorrow's big presentation to the Hartwell Group, the one that would supposedly secure our financial future. Our future. The irony would hit me later, sharp and bitter as the November wind that was already rattling our windows. I glanced at the digital clock on the microwave. 7:43 p.m. Mark had been in the shower for exactly 12 minutes. I knew because I'd started timing his routines months ago, trying to understand why our life felt so choreographed, so perfectly scheduled that there was no room for spontaneity or genuine connection. Another buzz. I glanced at the screen, and my world tilted on its axis. Jessica, downtown office. "Can't wait for Cabo next week. The resort looks amazing. Love you, baby." The plate slipped from my numb fingers, shattering against the porcelain sink. Fragments scattered like the pieces of my carefully constructed life, white ceramic mixed with soap bubbles and the remnants of our dinner. I stared at those words until they burned into my retinas. Cabo. Next week. Love you, baby. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the cold tile floor, my back against the mahogany cabinet I'd picked out during our kitchen renovation 3 years ago, the $47,000 renovation I'd paid for with my inheritance from Mom. The same tiles that had been installed while I was still grieving her death, trying to create something beautiful in a house that was beginning to feel like a mausoleum of broken promises. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Mom on her deathbed at Sloan Kettering, her hand paper thin in mine, whispering, "Take care of yourself, Sarah. Don't let anyone make you small." I'd been too consumed with grief to understand what she meant. Now, sitting on my kitchen floor with my husband's betrayal glowing on his phone screen, her words echoed through my chest like a prophecy. The shower stopped running. "Sarah, you okay down there?" Mark's voice drifted from upstairs, casual and warm. The same voice that had whispered, "I love you," in my ear that morning before leaving for his client meeting in Manhattan. The same voice that had comforted me through Mom's funeral, that had promised we'd use her money wisely, that had convinced me to put everything into our joint account because we're a team, babe. "Just dropped a plate," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady. But inside, I was cataloging everything with forensic precision. The weekend trips to scout new office locations that had started 6 months ago. The gym membership he'd suddenly needed at 38, claiming his doctor was concerned about his cholesterol. The credit card bill I wasn't supposed to see, the one with charges to Victoria's Secret, size small lingerie when I wore a large. The restaurant charges to places we'd never been together. The hushed phone calls he took on the back porch at 11 p.m., always about difficult clients who needed hand-holding. I pulled myself up, my knees shaking, and walked to his phone. The screen was still glowing, showing Jessica's message and her profile picture. A young woman with long dark hair and perfect teeth, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She couldn't be older than 25. My thumb hovered over the screen. In 22 years, I'd never invaded his privacy. I'd been the perfect wife, the one who trusted blindly, who believed in the sanctity of marriage even when my friends divorced around me like dominoes falling. Even when my sister Rachel had warned me that Mark seemed too smooth, too controlling, when we'd first started dating in college. I swiped up. The messages stretched back months. Cabo wasn't their first trip. There had been Miami in September, the weekend he'd told me he was visiting his sick aunt in Florida. Vegas in July, when he'd supposedly gone to a financial advisors conference. Atlantic City in May, during what he'd called a team-building retreat. All business trips, according to Mark. All lies, according to the dozens of photos Jessica had sent. Her in a bikini by a pool, the two of them toasting champagne in what looked like a penthouse suite, Mark's arm around her waist in front of the Bellagio fountains. Jessica: "Your wife really has no idea, does she?" Mark: "Sarah's completely clueless. Too busy playing housewife to notice anything. She hasn't asked me a real question about work in years." Jessica: "When are you going to tell her?" Mark: "After the Hartwell deal closes. I need her inheritance money to stay liquid until then. Once I have my commission from this deal, I'll have enough to start fresh with you." My mother's money. The $340,000 she'd left me after battling ovarian cancer for 2 years. Money I'd transferred to our joint account without hesitation because Mark said it would help with our investments. Money he'd assured me was growing safely in conservative mutual funds and CDs. Money that was apparently funding his affair and financing the lifestyle he was building with his secretary. I scrolled further. Each message a deeper cut. Mark: "She actually thanked me yesterday for taking such good care of our finances. God, she's pathetic." Jessica: "Does she suspect anything?" Mark: "Are you kidding? She's so desperate to believe in our happy marriage that she'll rationalize anything. Last week she found a hotel receipt in my jacket and actually thanked me for working so hard to provide for us." I remembered that receipt. The Four Seasons in Miami. I'd found it while taking his jacket to the dry cleaner, and when I'd asked about it, he'd spun some elaborate story about a client dinner that ran late, how he'd had to get a room rather than catch the last flight home. I'd felt guilty for questioning him. Jessica: "Poor thing. She has no idea what's coming." Mark: "She'll be fine. She can keep the house. I just need to extract my assets first. And her mother's money, obviously." Jessica: "Our assets, you mean?" Mark: "Exactly. Though I still can't believe she was stupid enough to put everything in joint accounts. Her financial advisor, that woman Patricia, tried to warn her about keeping some assets separate. Sarah actually called me crying because she thought Patricia didn't trust our marriage. The bathroom door opened upstairs. I could hear his feet padding across our bedroom floor. The bedroom where we'd made love just last Sunday morning, where he'd held me afterward and talked about our future, our plans for the lake house, maybe even starting to travel now that Tommy was away at Northwestern. The bedroom where I'd learned to fake satisfaction so completely that even I sometimes forgot I was pretending. I took screenshots, 17 of them, each one a nail in the coffin of my marriage. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the phone. 22 years of my life reduced to digital evidence of betrayal. 22 years of birthdays and anniversaries, of supporting him through his father's death and his career struggles, of moving 3 times for his job promotions, of postponing my own dreams because our family needs stability right now. I thought about the master's degree in art history I'd never finished because Mark got a job offer in Connecticut right before my thesis defense. "You can always go back to school later," he'd said. "Right now, I need you to focus on us." Later never came. Instead came the miscarriage at 28 that left me hollow and desperate for purpose, channeling all my maternal energy into taking care of him. Then came the failed IVF attempts that drained our savings. My savings from my part-time job at the art gallery, because Mark's insurance wouldn't cover elective procedures. Finally came Tommy, our miracle baby, and with him, the agreement that I'd stay home because childcare is so expensive and you're so good at this domestic stuff. Mark: "She's so pathetic. Still thinks I'm attracted to her after all these years. The way she tries to keep herself looking young. It's embarrassing." Jessica: "What do you mean?" Mark: "She started working out again, bought some new clothes, keeps asking if I notice. It's like watching a middle-aged woman trying to reclaim her college body. Sad, really." I looked down at my clothes, jeans I'd bought last month in a size smaller than I'd worn in years, a sweater in a color my sister said brought out my eyes. I'd felt pretty when I put them on this morning, confident even. Now I felt foolish, transparent. Jessica: "Maybe she's starting to suspect something?" Mark: "Trust me, Sarah couldn't find a clue if it was gift-wrapped and handed to her. She's been sleepwalking through our marriage for years. The footsteps moved down the hallway. He'd be downstairs in less than a minute, expecting his phone, expecting his dinner conversation about my day, which never varied. Grocery shopping, cleaning, maybe lunch with one of my few remaining friends. Expecting me to ask interested questions about his work while he ate the meal I'd prepared. I scrolled faster, desperate to understand the scope of his deception. Mark, the best part is she actually thinks we're happy. She told her sister last week that we have the strongest marriage in the family. Jessica, OMG, stop. That's so sad. Mark, I know, right? She's living in this complete fantasy. Sometimes I almost feel bad for her. Jessica, not bad enough to stop taking her mother's money. Mark, hey, that money was left to both of us. We're married. Jessica, for now. Babe, have you seen my phone? Mark appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair damp from the shower, wearing the navy robe I'd bought him for Christmas last year. He looked relaxed, confident, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. The same boyish smile that had charmed me in college, the same easy confidence that had made me feel safe when we were young, and I thought safety was the same thing as love. Right here, I said, holding it up. My voice was ice cold, a tone I'd never used with him before. He reached for it casually, the way he always did, expecting me to hand it over like the obedient wife I'd been for more than 2 decades. But I pulled it back slightly. Interesting messages from Jessica. The color drained from his face so quickly, I thought he might faint. His hand, still extended toward the phone, began to tremble. For a moment, neither of us moved. We stood there in our kitchen, my kitchen, bought with my mother's life insurance money, staring at each other across a chasm that had opened in the space of 5 words. Then he lunged for the phone, desperation replacing his casual demeanor, the mask of the loving husband dissolving to reveal something ugly and panicked underneath. You weren't supposed to see that. The words exploded from him, raw and panicked, confirming everything I'd suspected about the carefully constructed fiction of our marriage. No, I said quietly, stepping back and clutching his phone to my chest. I wasn't. I had never seen Mark look afraid before. In 22 years, he'd always been the one in control, the successful financial advisor who handled everything, who made the decisions, who patted my head when I had opinions about money or investments or anything beyond the domestic sphere he'd assigned me to. He'd trained me to be small, to be grateful, to be unquestioning. But right now, standing in our kitchen in his Christmas bathrobe, he looked like a cornered animal. Sarah, listen to me. No. The word came out sharper than I intended, surprising both of us. You listen to me. I know about Cabo. I know about Miami and Vegas and Atlantic City. I know about my mother's money. I know about the Hartwell presentation tomorrow. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. How much did you? All of it. I held up the phone. Every disgusting detail of your affair. Every cruel joke at my expense. Every plan to steal from me and abandon me. It's not stealing. We're married. What's yours is mine. And what's yours is Jessica's, apparently. I scrolled through his phone deliberately, reading aloud. Sarah's completely clueless, too busy playing housewife to notice anything. She's so pathetic. The way she tries to keep herself looking young is embarrassing. Each word hit him like a physical blow. He actually stepped backward. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. You're going to go upstairs and pack a bag. You're going to leave, tonight. You can't just... I can. This is my house, Mark. My name is on the deed. My mother's money paid for the renovations, the furniture, even that robe you're wearing. That wasn't entirely true. We'd bought the house together when we were newlyweds, but the fear in his eyes told me he wasn't going to fact-check me right now. The Hartwell presentation will happen without you. I pulled out my own phone with my free hand. Because I'm calling David Hartwell first thing Monday morning. Mark's face went ashen. David Hartwell wasn't just a potential client. He was Mark's college roommate, the godfather to our son, a man who'd attended our wedding and had been to our house for Christmas dinner every year for the past decade. David had been the best man at our wedding, had held my hand at my mother's funeral, had invested his own family's money with Mark's firm based on 20 years of friendship and trust. You wouldn't I? I held up Mark's phone, finger poised over David's number in the contacts. Want to bet your career on my forgiving nature? Because according to these messages, you seem to think I'm completely clueless and pathetic. Maybe it's time to test that theory. For the first time in our marriage, I had power. Real power. And Mark knew it. His whole body seemed to deflate. Sarah, please, we can work this out. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything. I leaned against the kitchen island, the one I'd researched and selected, the one I'd supervised the installation of while he was on one of his business trips that I now knew were romantic getaways. It means you've been lying to me for months. It means you've stolen my inheritance to fund your affair. It means you were planning to leave me with nothing. I never said I was leaving you with nothing. She can keep the house. I just need to extract my assets first. I quoted his own words back to him. You were going to clean out our accounts and disappear with your 25-year-old secretary. She's 28, he said automatically, then realized how that sounded. I laughed, a sound I didn't recognize coming from my own throat. Oh, well, that changes everything. A mature woman of 28. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the competition at work, the economy, trying to provide for this family. By stealing from your wife and humiliating her with your mistress, by calling her pathetic and embarrassing, by planning to abandon her after 22 years. My voice was rising, all the suppressed anger of years finally finding its outlet. What exactly did I do to deserve this, Mark? What crime did I commit? Being loyal? Being trusting? Taking care of you and our son and our home while you built your career? He ran his hands through his damp hair, the same gesture he'd always made when he was frustrated. You wouldn't understand. You've never had to compete in the real world. You've never had to what? Support a family? I worked until Tommy was born. I gave up my master's degree for your career. I moved 3 times in 5 years because of your job. I took care of your dying father for 6 months while you were too busy to visit him more than twice. I put my mother's entire inheritance into our joint account without question because I trusted you. What exactly have I never had to do? The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Mrs. Henderson's leaf blower. Mark stood there in his bathrobe, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. This isn't how I wanted you to find out, he said finally. How did you want me to find out? After you'd drained our accounts? After you'd filed for divorce? After you'd moved to Mexico with Jessica and left me to explain to our son why his father abandoned his family? I would never abandon Tommy. You were planning to abandon his mother, which amounts to the same thing. I thought of our son, 800 miles away at Northwestern, proud of his parents' marriage, always bragging to his friends about how his mom and dad were still in love after all these years. How exactly were you going to explain this to him? Mark's shoulders sagged. I don't know. Well, you better figure it out, because I'm calling him tomorrow. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of recriminations and revelations. Mark packed 2 suitcases while I sat at our kitchen table, forwarding his messages to my email account and printing out screenshots. He tried to negotiate, to minimize, to explain away months of calculated betrayal. Sarah, please, we can work this out. People get past affairs all the time. Silence. I never meant for you to find out like this. Silence. You're my wife. You're the mother of my son. That has to count for something. That one almost broke me. Almost. But then I remembered Jessica's words. She has no idea what's coming. And Mark's response, she'll be fine. She can keep the house. They'd discussed my future like I was a pet they were rehoming. The money isn't gone, he said desperately, as he folded shirts into his suitcase. I can get it back. The trips, the restaurants, it's maybe $20,000. I can pay it back. It's not about the money, Mark. Then what? I'll end it with Jessica. I'll quit the firm if I have to. We can start over. I looked at this man I'd loved for half my life, this stranger who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my mother's deathbed vigil, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even pity. Just a vast, empty space where 22 years of marriage used to be. You called me pathetic, I said quietly. He stopped folding. I was angry. I didn't mean... You said I was embarrassing. You laughed about me with your mistress. You called me clueless and desperate and sad. My voice was steady now, matter of fact. Those weren't words said in anger, Mark. Those were your real thoughts about me. Probably thoughts you've had for years but were too cowardly to say to my face. That's not true. It is true. And that's the part I can't forgive. Not the affair, not even the theft, the cruelty, the contempt, the complete lack of respect for a woman who spent 22 years of her life loving you. When Mark finally loaded his suitcases into his BMW, the one I'd co-signed for, the one whose payments came out of our joint account, I stood in the doorway and watched him back out of our driveway for the last time. The October air was crisp against my skin, carrying the scent of burning leaves from our neighbor's yard and the faint smell of wood smoke from someone's fireplace. I should have felt something: grief, anger, fear about the future. Instead, I felt hollow, like a house after the furniture has been moved out. I walked back inside and poured myself a glass of wine, a bottle of Pinot Noir I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. First, I called Patricia, my financial advisor, the one Mark had convinced me to fire 3 years ago because she'd suggested keeping some assets in my name only. "Sarah, it's late. Is everything okay?" "Patricia, I need your help. Mark's been having an affair, and I think he's been stealing my inheritance money." 2 hours later, I had a clearer picture of our finances. The news was worse than I'd thought. The conservative investments Mark had described were actually high-risk stock trades, most of which had lost money. Of my mother's $340,000, less than $200,000 remained. The rest had funded Mark's lifestyle of hotels, restaurants, gifts for Jessica, and several loans to friends that had never been repaid. But I also learned something else. Mark had been intercepting calls and statements from our bank and investment accounts. He'd set up email forwarding so I never saw the monthly reports. He'd told me our financial advisor had retired when actually he'd switched to a firm that specialized in what Patricia called aggressive wealth management, a euphemism for gambling with other people's money. I called David Hartwell at 8:17 a.m. Monday morning. "Sarah, how wonderful to hear from you. How's Mark? Ready for the big presentation this afternoon?" "That's actually why I'm calling, David. There won't be a presentation." 20 minutes later, I'd sent him 17 screenshots and told him everything. David was quiet for a long moment after I finished. "Jesus Christ, Sarah. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry for me, David. Be sorry for your portfolio. Mark's been using risky investment strategies that he probably didn't fully disclose. You might want to have someone else review your accounts." That wasn't entirely true. I had no evidence of professional misconduct beyond the personal financial mismanagement, but I'd learned something valuable from my husband. Sometimes the truth needed a little strategic editing. "I'll look into it immediately. Sarah, if there's anything Carol and I can do, just be a good godfather to Tommy. This is going to be hard on him." By 10 a.m., Mark's phone was blowing up. By noon, he was unemployed. David had called his boss immediately after our conversation. By 2 p.m., Mark was calling me, crying. "You destroyed my career. 20 years of work, gone. You destroyed your career the day you decided to steal from your wife and mock her with your secretary. I just turned on the lights. How am I supposed to live? Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know, Mark. Maybe Jessica can help you figure it out. You seem to think she was such a great partner." Jessica called me that evening. Her voice was shaky, tearful. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Jessica. I think we need to talk." "I don't think we do. Please, Mark told me you were separated. He said you'd grown apart, that you were getting divorced anyway." "I never would have, Jessica." I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. "I've seen the messages. I know you knew I existed. I know you knew about my mother's money. I know you knew Mark was planning to leave me with nothing." Silence on the other end. "But I also know you're 28 years old, and Mark is a very charming man when he wants something. He's had 22 years of practice manipulating women who love him." She started crying then. "He promised we were going to get married. He said he just needed to get his finances in order first. And now you know what his promises are worth." I lost my job too. Mr. Hartwell called our boss. I'm blacklisted in the financial services industry. I felt a flicker of sympathy for this young woman who'd been as deceived as I had, just in a different way. "Jessica, can I give you some advice?" "Okay. Find a man who doesn't require you to help him destroy someone else's life. Find someone who doesn't ask you to keep secrets or lie or betray other women. Find someone who sees you as more than a pretty young thing to make him feel powerful." She hung up without saying goodbye. Over the next several weeks, I began to understand the true scope of Mark's deception. With Patricia's help, I discovered that he'd taken out a second mortgage on our house without my knowledge, forging my signature on the documents. He'd opened credit cards in both our names and run up $43,000 in debt. He'd borrowed against his life insurance policy and cashed out his entire 401k, paying massive penalties. The man I'd thought was a successful financial advisor was actually drowning in debt, using my mother's money to maintain the illusion of prosperity while building a backup plan with a woman young enough to be impressed by expensive dinners and weekend getaways. But I also learned something about myself. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. 3 months after Mark left, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, signing divorce papers. My attorney, a sharp woman named Caroline who specialized in cases involving financial fraud, had managed to protect most of my remaining assets. The house was mine, the legitimate joint accounts were mine, and Mark was responsible for the debts he'd incurred without my knowledge. "He's asking for spousal support," Caroline said, sliding another document across her desk. I laughed. Actually laughed. "On what grounds?" "He claims he sacrificed his career to support the family and deserves compensation for his contributions to the marriage." His contributions? I thought about 22 years of cooking his meals, raising his child, managing his household, supporting his career moves, and ultimately funding his affair with my inheritance. What contributions would those be? Emotional support, household management, career facilitation. Caroline's expression was carefully neutral. "It's a standard claim in divorce cases. Deny it." "Sarah, in New York State, deny it. I have documentation of his affair, his theft, and his plans to abandon me. If he wants a fight, he can have one." 6 months later, the divorce was final. Mark got nothing except the debt he'd accumulated and the shame of being known throughout Westchester County as the financial advisor who'd stolen from his wife to fund his affair. I got the house, my mother's remaining money, and something I'd never had in 22 years of marriage: the freedom to be myself. On a crisp December morning, almost exactly a year after that night in the kitchen, I was loading groceries into my car when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Sarah?" I turned. Mark stood there in a worn winter coat I didn't recognize, holding a coffee from the gas station convenience store. He looked older, smaller somehow. The confidence that had defined him for as long as I'd known him was gone, replaced by something hollow and defeated. "You look good," he said quietly. I did look good. I'd lost 20 pounds without trying, started wearing clothes I actually liked instead of what I thought a good wife should wear. My hair was shorter, highlighted with subtle blonde streaks that brought out my eyes, the same eyes Mark had once called beautiful, back when he was trying to win me. I joined a yoga class, started painting again, made new friends who knew nothing about my former life as a suburban wife. "Thank you. How's Tommy?" "He's fine. Angry at you, but fine. He'll come around eventually." Mark nodded, looking down at his feet. "I've been thinking. Maybe we could talk. Maybe try to work things out." I looked at this man I'd loved for half my life, this stranger who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my mother's deathbed vigil. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even pity, just a vast indifference, as if he were a character from a book I'd read long ago and barely remembered. "Mark, I need you to understand something. You didn't just cheat on me. You humiliated me. You stole from me. You laughed at me with your mistress. You planned to leave me with nothing while pretending to love me. I know, but people change. I've changed. Have you? Or are you just desperate because Jessica dumped you when the money ran out? Because you're living in a studio apartment and working at H&R Block instead of managing million-dollar portfolios?" His face flushed red. "That's not fair." Fair? The word came out sharper than I intended, drawing stares from other shoppers in the parking lot. "Was it fair when you called me pathetic? When you stole my mother's money? When you planned to abandon me after 22 years of marriage?" "I never meant—" "Yes, you did. You meant every word. The only thing you didn't mean was for me to find out about it." I walked around to the driver's side of my car, a new Honda Civic that I'd bought with cash, the first major purchase I'd made in years without consulting anyone else. "Sarah, please. I know I made mistakes, but we had 22 good years together. That has to count for something." I paused with my hand on the door handle. "Did we? Were they really good years, Mark? Or were they good years for you, while I slowly disappeared into the background of my own life?" I got in my car and rolled down the window. "I hope you find happiness," I said, and I meant it. I hope you learn to build a life that doesn't require destroying someone else's. As I drove home through streets lined with Christmas decorations, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. She would have taken him back. She would have believed his apologies, his promises, his tears. She would have rebuilt their life on the same foundation of lies and half-truths, and settled for whatever scraps of affection he chose to throw her way. But that woman was gone, shattered like the plate that had fallen in my kitchen sink on that October evening when everything changed. She died the moment I read those messages, the moment I realized that the man I'd devoted my life to saw me as an object of contempt rather than love. The woman driving this car, planning a New Year's Eve trip to Paris with my college roommate Margaret, looking forward to Tommy's spring break visit, considering the charming divorced architect who'd asked me to dinner 3 times and was patiently waiting for me to be ready. This woman was someone entirely new. Someone who understood the difference between being loved and being useful. Someone who would never again settle for being anyone's secret shame. Someone who had learned that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering the truth about people you thought you could trust. Someone free. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment in my car, looking at my house, truly my house now, with its warm lights glowing in the winter dusk. Through the front window, I could see the Christmas tree I decorated myself this year, smaller than the elaborate productions Mark had always insisted on, but perfect for a woman living alone who was finally learning what she actually liked. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "Hey Mom, can't wait to come home for break. How about we try that new Italian place in town? Just the 2 of us?" I typed back, "It's a date. Love you, sweetheart." For the first time in years, I was looking forward to the holidays.